Welcome, everybody, to the Community Spotlight with Berkeley Compute. We have a great team here from BC, and we're going to dive into their business, learn a little bit more about decentralized GPUs, and some of the really cool DePIN activities that have started to occur on Chia itself. To introduce everybody here, we do have Dylan Rose. You guys know him from Evergreen Miner. Definitely a great asset in the development of the ecosystem, helping to support farmers, and really push forward with how hardware can be used within the Chia ecosystem. Everybody knows JM Hands. He's been instrumental in the development and analysis of proof of space, as well as making sure your hard drives can actually do the proof of space computations that are needed. Everybody knows that he loves to get into the math, loves to get into the nitty gritty, and really does a great job at uncovering the true reasons behind why proof of space works well and what we can do with it. And then, of course, we all know Paul Hainsworth, and he had worked with CNI for a while as well. Paul Hainsworth is a great idea guy. I've known him to be an innovator in the space and really start thinking about unique opportunities that exist within the blockchain and the ecosystem as a whole. So thank you three for jumping in. For the audience members, thank you for attending. If you do have any questions, we are answering any questions that are added to the Zoom Q&A. If you're watching this on YouTube, please jump into our Discord server and ask your questions in the community feedback channel. We do have a link to that in the general channel of our Discord as well. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the team so they can do a quick introduction of themselves here.
Okay, I can kick it off. My name is Paul Hainsworth. I am co-founder and CEO here at Berkeley Compute. As you heard from Brant a moment ago, I was formerly with Chia Blockchain. I was chief product officer there when I was at Chia for a little over 2 years. Left last year to start working on my own thing, and that has culminated in Berkeley Compute, the origin story of which we'll get into in a little bit. I'll pass it to you, Jan.
Yeah, so John Michael Hands, co-founder and chief product officer at Berkeley Compute. As many of you guys know, I was VP of storage at Chia and am still an advisor to Chia and run our circular drive initiative. Yeah, we decided to get into the DePIN space.
Hey everyone, I'm Dylan, co-founder and CTO at Berkeley. You probably know me from running Evergreen Miner, so I'm very familiar with the entire stack at Chia and building and integrating hardware on Chia. Evergreen in building a lot of hard drive devices, we dipped our toe into high performance compute and kind of snowballed into GPUs, and so that's how I find myself here today.
Well, thank you all very much. And I know we're going to have a number of questions from the community. I went ahead and created a few starter questions as well. And I'm going to do my best to feed them to who I think might be best to answer it. However, if I'm wrong and somebody else wants to jump in, provide the answer, feel free to do so. Paul, as you suggested, I think we should start off with Berkeley Compute's core mission. How does it aim to impact the AI computing landscape, and what was kind of the rationale behind starting Berkeley Compute? And I think I can turn that over to you, Paul.
Sure, yeah, thanks. I'd be happy to jump in. So we're on a mission to build the largest compute network in the world, specifically for AI. And we have a slightly different take on it versus what hyperscalers are doing. We're trying to build a distributed compute network that enables anybody to participate and contribute their resources, either as a data center operator or as a GPU owner. And I think we've taken a very different view on how to build that. We're getting into the product details as we get farther into this. We believe that by democratizing or decentralizing compute, it opens up the door for a bunch of different things that help differentiate what we're doing. Maybe Jam, you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, Bray, I think some of you guys might have seen, we got a blog now on the Berkeley Compute website, and we're going to be trying to articulate some of the vision and some of the background on these blog posts. Because some of this, I think, a lot of people, just have seen, oh, there's some deep in crypto stuff out there. Okay, isn't there a bunch of other stuff out there? What makes you guys different? And so obviously Paul mentioned, like, first is just to understand, like, kind of how we got here. Like I still have ties in the traditional tech world, and I talk to many of these guys on a regular basis, and I kind of walked them through this whole process. So, like, for the traditional tech world, like, we in the crypto world know this deep in space, and Equate's kind of what it means, but the idea of, like, decentralizing hardware. But in the in the traditional tech world, they're still like, wait, why is cloud broken? And the first blog post I wrote was kind of this walking through this transition from the cloud to deep in networks. And it kind of started, like, I started thinking about this a while ago, where Google Cloud gave me like $300 worth of free credits. And I was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna spin up some GPUs and do some tests for Chia plotting. This was like back in the day, like a year ago. And I literally could not get a GPU instance. I had to, like, increase my quota. I had to, like, even to get from one GPU to two GPUs, it was like, your account doesn't have access for two GPUs. What on earth is going on here? So the cloud had all these promises about being cost competitive and scalable and flexible, being able to have all these different options for GPUs and different instance types. And the reality is that they just care about making money. And it's the major cloud service providers, and again, you'll hear the deep in guys say this, it's just like the cloud are the enemy. But we have to look at, like, what the cloud did right, which is this whole reliability and availability and like quality service is really important. And that's what some of the deep in stuff are missing right now. Like I think and we'll talk a lot about the competition and stuff that's out there, but I think if you think about how we think about the deep in market, is that this model where there's, like, smaller regional data centers and smaller providers are going to be much more cost competitive versus the cloud. And there's a bunch of stuff you have to fix to recap for all the reliability, security, availability, and all the things that the cloud does actually do really well. So
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, thank you very much. And I appreciate the deep dive into the current reality of cloud GPUs and kind of a great reason as to why BC has a great entry point as to its target. Now, you guys have done a great overview of kind of your vision, the introduction, but I think we want to drill a little bit more down into the actual decentralized GPU network. You started to identify how it differs, but can we go a little bit more into the actual GPU NFTs? What is going to make this a decentralized and democratized GPU network? And JM, that might be in part you, and then Dylan, I know you have some stuff to say in this as well.
yeah, go ahead, Dylan. Or,
So Clyde, just to kind of enumerate, maybe we could start with a high level explanation of the way that we're thinking about the GPU NFTs, and then why that's like a compelling part of the product. So, we kind of already talked about this. One of the key differentiations for us versus other distributed cloud GPU networks, right? And that might be Web3, that might be Web2, but there's this idea that anybody or any data center could become a part of this network where people can access cloud compute. That's kind of the high level idea. And what we found in going to both of the Web2 and Web3 networks is they seem to be missing some key primitives that were a big advantage in crypto, right? And so kind of to give the analogy is, in Chia we have our plots, or in mining you have hash power, and it's this provable, unique identifier that really has this baked in idea that somebody is providing resources for the network, and then again this baked in idea that they're getting rewarded for it. Whereas today in a world where you don't have something as strong as proof of work or proof of space, you're really reliant on these centralized parties to say, oh yeah, this asset, this compute is valuable, reliable, etc. And it just leads to tracking issues, accounting issues that make it very hard to scale these networks beyond, 500 or 1,000 GPUs. And so the flip side is you just centralize all of it. You put it all in one data center, and you don't have to deal with, this concept of unique assets in different locations. So our approach is that we wanted to create a digital twin for each of these clusters in the form of an NFT. And what that means is we can always look on chain and say, okay, there is this actual asset. It's alive, it's working, it's done this amount of work, and it's earned this amount of money. And again, in the Chia world, your launcher ID or your payout address is kind of that provable provable endpoint to say, okay, this person did some work, therefore they got rewarded. And we'd like to see the GPU NFT become a similar instantiation of that idea. This actual thing, this real thing that's a digital twin, is the thing doing work on the network and therefore is getting rewarded. And that primitive, we believe, unlocks a variety of benefits and use cases versus networks that don't have a strong asset representation, where their focus is more on, our network as a whole did this amount of volume, but they couldn't really tell you, this cluster is valuable to this extent. This is the history of the cluster, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions there. And then I think that there's a whole positive conversation to be had about why this is important and what are the use cases that it unlocks.
Yeah, thank you very much, and certainly a great overview. You touched a little bit on the concept of how, these are digital twins that are assigned to the GPU clusters themselves, and then these are essentially going to be pooled together so that you could reach out to any one of these clusters. Can you describe a little bit more about the pooling protocol and how that's going to benefit this concept of digital twins and democratization?
Yeah, so pooling has kind of a, a, a broad interpretation, right, in a lot of different contexts. So if we use a Web 2 example of how GPUs are pooled today, one platform, call it Vast AI, right? So Vast, you can go and see Vast. They've pooled their GPUs in the sense that if you go to Vast and you ask for GPU resources, you can get routed to any which one of these GPUs. And so in and of itself, Vast, in kind of this crypto context, operates as a pool, but it's missing like one critical feature that has not been introduced to this space at all, which is the idea on Chia or Bitcoin, where the pool is both pooling resources together, but also distributing payments in an even and fair way, right? So on Vast, you might look at their utilization and see 75% utilization. Like, that's great. But the issue today is you might be, as an operator, stuck in that 25% that's unrented. So it is in GPUs today, there's no 75%. It is 0% or 100%. You're either being used or you're not. And so one of the clear issues that we saw that could be solved with, this kind of similar idea of a plot NFT that joins a pool, you have a GPU NFT that joins a pool, and that is up to the owner to decide that. And what that does is the same thing. When that GPU gets a reward, it gets distributed with the other folks in that pool. And again, this is something that has not been addressed at all in the GPU space, and it leaves operators with a very specific problem, which is when they're at zero, right? They might get 3 weeks of great utilization and then zero. They could be doing a bunch of other things for that week. They could be, mining crypto. They could be listing it on another platform. They could be, playing video games. But that's not good for anybody involved. What we want is for those resources to be idle and ready, but we need to make sure that the overhead, the 25%, remains incentivized. And so I think that is one of the most critical and revolutionary ideas. And in our opinion, it's something that's only achievable on blockchain. Simply because this idea of combining resources from many different owners starts to resemble not a just a pool, but it actually starts to resemble a fund or a business, right? And so what we don't want is this situation where two owners have to start a whole new LLC and business together in order to in order to pool this, right? So that is what I see pooling doing for the space and for us specifically.
That's excellent. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the deep dive and the overview of pooling and how it truly differentiates from what's currently available within these GPU clusters. We do have a question inside of the Discord, and it kind of affects the pooling concept, but it's how exactly is the network latency solved? What internet connection could somebody at home with a GPU need in order to participate? Or is network latency not really important for the type of work that these GPUs will be doing?
Yeah, so one of the things that we kind of walked through in our light paper, if you read it, was the idea of these data center providers. So for like, there may be some inference endpoints that are like inferencing a really small model or like image generation that is completely stateless, doesn't require a bunch of internet bandwidth, maybe not even any internet latency, might not be a big deal. If your time to token is like 5 or 6 seconds, then a couple hundred milliseconds of latency is not a big deal. And there's some of those use cases that like the only thing that matters is dollar per token, and that those kind of compute workloads will go towards the edge to wherever the cost is the lowest. But clearly there's this large market, and Dylan mentioned that some of these compute markets that are out there, and some of them are more regulated, where they have a specific set of requirements and a minimum bar to entry. Like, for instance, one of the partners we work with right now, like Dylan and I have worked with in the GPU space, is called RunPod, and they have a secure cloud, and their definition of secure cloud is like a tier 3 cloud, a tier 3 data center, which means basically you have N+1 or redundant internet, you have redundant power, meaning at the rack level, at the data center level, and obviously your home is not going to have a 4 nines availability for good latency. And there's different workloads and different pricing for this idea of like a community cloud, which is like these lower cost inference endpoints that could be anywhere on somebody's 4090 at home, versus like somebody fine tuning a model where, okay, they need 4 to 8 GPUs and they need them for 3 or 4 days, and they need to not to have that go down. And, they need high burstable internet bandwidth. So there's a lot of different requirements for the AI market, and we're definitely going to be parsing through all those out of what makes sense for our protocol.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and we just received a question in the Q&A that's a little bit geared towards that, and it's kind of the different quality of GPUs that providers might have. So as you mentioned, you might have somebody at home who has a 3060 and they just want to make a little bit of extra, and you might have these large data centers that have massive clusters. It sounds like you're going to have some requirements for the protocol itself in order to participate, but are you also including things like different tiers for the pools themselves? And I know, Paul, you wanted to answer this question, but essentially, will there be tiers and pools? And what prevents somebody with an ancient GPU from joining a pool and essentially leeching payouts?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I'll start by saying that we're shipping our protocol iteratively. We're taking an kind of an MVP approach. And the first iteration of this is very much focused on data center operators who are primarily managing the GPUs and clusters that are in their custody. And so that kind of eliminates this initial problem, because what the person is asking in their question is actually a very hard problem to solve. And so rather than spending a long time building that out, and by the way, the other Web3 players are struggling with this too. We're focusing initially on not addressing that problem. So in our phased approach, Evergreen, as a data center operator on Berkeley Compute, can run a pool of all like GPUs, 4090s, for example, and they'll earn smooth payouts. So that Evergreen doesn't have to worry about there being a bad actor or an ancient GPU hanging out in there leeching. a further evolution of the protocol will enable people to participate in a distributed pool in which the participants aren't all custodied by one actor. And as I say, that's going to take a little longer to build. We're really focused on moving quickly, generating revenue for GPU cluster owners as quickly as possible. And so that's why we're starting with this kind of simpler approach initially.
Thank you very much. And I think that leads directly into the next question here. Presumably, you guys have a few GPUs yourself, and you've mentioned that like Evergreen Miner has a GPU. The core question is, how many GPUs does Berkeley Compute own?
Oh, so Berkeley Compute itself doesn't own GPUs. We're almost like Airbnb for GPUs. And I say that because uh, there are a few actors in our ecosystem. One is someone who wants to rent GPUs to do AI training and workloads or inferencing workloads. Another is a data center operator. This is a player like Evergreen or Farm GPU. And then the other actor are GPU owners themselves. We're providing the toolkit for data center operators and GPU owners to participate in the ecosystem. It's not our intention to buy and run GPUs ourselves. I think we have a pretty remarkable start as a super early stage startup. As many of you know, we just closed a seed round led by Chia Network. And I think we have a huge head start because both Evergreen and Farm GPU are the two first data center operators in our ecosystem, and they have a bunch of GPUs. So maybe Dylan, you want to talk about what is in your custody, and then JM, you can talk about what Farm GPU's got.
Yeah, so starting in pretty much January of this year, we kind of took a spin on a similar model to Evergreen, where you would buy some hardware and the hardware would earn money. In the case of Evergreen, it was hard drives and Chia. In the case of Evergreen GPU, it's GPUs and AI workloads. The caveat is, a lot of you are familiar with cloud mining or hosting. These have to be hosted to really achieve acceptance in the market now. They have to be in a high performance data center. So while we did take many different owners where different people actually own the systems, the custody is all in a single location at a high performance data center. And so we have 800 4090s running across 100 different clusters that each have 8 in a single room, high performance environment. And our goal is to get those rented out and earning the most amount and distribute those rewards to the owners. And currently this is all in like a Web 2 environment, which is how it became very clear that a Web 3 environment would ease a lot of the operational challenges.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, quite the impressive stack of GPUs you guys have sitting in that data center. Very, very good to know about that, and know that the compute ability will be there so that once BC starts operations, there will already be pools available from well-known and established community members to participate. And Paul, I know you want to answer this next question here, and it's more about BC and how they're going to play this
Sorry,
role.
Brent, just before we jump into that,
Yep.
I had to step away for a quick second. I apologize. JM, did you get to answer where Farm GPU stands with
Oh, yeah,
GPUs?
and I think it's probably a good idea to say like like to what Dylan said, these are not related. They're separate entities from Berkeley Compute, right? We have our own startups. Dylan had Evergreen. I had a company called Farm GPU, which we had really started. It's funny enough. I had been repurposing. I had a bunch of servers and GPUs that we had from Chia, from Chia plotting, and we're like, yeah, all right, what can we do with these? And so we had put a couple of these on some of these platforms like RunPod. This was like maybe almost a year ago. And, you know, it was just amazing. You know, the profitability was obviously like, that's why, hence a lot of these crypto miners are like kind of turning to this new on-demand compute platforms, just because the earnings are a lot more. And so we actually built or partnering with a tier 3 data center out here in Rancho Cordova, California. You know, I mentioned tier 3 is like, you know, redundant power, internet, you know, top, you know, like security compliance, where you have physical isolation, you have encryption, and you know, there's lots of other security requirements. But so we are taking an approach where we're building out like more expensive like enterprise level cards, you know, like H100s, 6000 ADAs, and we've also messed around with a bunch of 4090s as well. But we have kind of a mix of different types of GPUs, but the idea is that we're generating revenue with these by running them on it with AI workloads, rather than be on these on-demand platforms in deep in space, you know, partnering with everybody. But yeah, so what Paul was mentioning, one of our strategies was like, how do we get in the beginning of the network reliable operators, and so that when we tokenize the compute for these GPU NFTs, that, you know, that it's a known reliable configuration. This is just what we'll talk a lot about it. This is just one of the problems with tokenizing a real world asset. There has to be some sort of physical connection to the real world. Like, in which case, in ours, it's going to be actual service agreements and contracts and ownership and legal stuff that is attached to that NFT.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate understanding the other side of the farm, and know that we have multiple operators that'll be in this space to provide high quality GPU compute. And you know, kind of painting the picture here, we have BC, who's creating the protocol and helping to manage all of this. We have individual providers who are offering up GPU computability to participate. And then, of course, we have the GPU NFT owners, and we'll get to them in a moment. But to focus more on that central part, Paul, if you don't mind explaining, how does Berkeley Compute make money? Is it through transaction fees from the tokens that flow for payouts, direct fees to customers? Kind of where is the revenue model for Berkeley Compute here?
Yeah, so it may not be too surprising that we haven't locked on a final revenue model, given how early we are. We think there are many ways in which we could monetize our participation in the ecosystem. Though I would say a primary driver for us is in where we put our time is around how quickly can we grow. And to us, growth means the revenue generated across the ecosystem for rentals, the number of GPUs on the network, and the number of operators. Because we believe the more operators there are, the more resilient the network becomes. The more operators there are, the more likely they are able to find competitive advantage in low-cost locations, in places where they just have an unfair advantage over other centralized Web2 players. And so we think about that as a primary focus right now. We do also think about, you know, long term, how does Berkeley Compute make money? We don't want to just keep on raising capital. Some of those things that we think about are charging a marketplace rake. And we can do that by, so there will be a marketplace where people can come and rent compute. We're going to build that web interface for it. And people will be able to reserve and buy compute that way. We could potentially charge a rake on any purchases through that interface. We also will almost certainly have a sales organization that goes out and directly sells compute on the network. And we think this is an important value add that Berkeley Compute brings to the data center operators and the GPU owners. And so if we have a sales team going out to do that, they're going to take a piece of that revenue. We have contemplated, though, that as an open source protocol, it will certainly be possible for anybody to just buy and book their own rentals directly without having to rely on Berkeley Compute Incorporated to do that. We're trying to build a peer-to-peer network here, though we don't have any illusions that there's a if we build it, they'll come kind of thing here. Like we have to very actively promote and drive growth of this thing. And so we're going to invest in doing that. So there's revenue there for us. Those are some pretty good starting points that we think about in terms of taking a transaction fee after the fact on everything. That doesn't seem very appealing to me personally, because we are building an open source protocol. If we get any kind of measure of success, people could just fork it and remove that transaction fee. So that doesn't seem like a particularly appealing approach to us.
Yeah, understandable. Thank you very much. Really fills in that gap as to what BC's vision is and how they want to operate in the space. And it's great that your initial focus is building out and ensuring robustness of that decentralized network. I think that's a great first step there. Now we've talked a lot about how Berkeley Compute is going to participate, how these different GPU providers are going to participate, and we've only alluded to this other piece of the pie, and that's how can somebody participate when they don't have a GPU, they aren't part of Berkeley Compute, and they don't need compute resources themselves. I know we've talked about GPU NFTs, and Dylan, maybe you could dive a little bit more into that concept for us.
Yeah, so one of the key pieces, we've talked a lot about, who might be renting compute. We've talked a lot about who might be running the compute, but one of our key concepts is that people can own compute without having to deal with all of this, just in the same way that you might have spun up a Chia farm and, set it and forget it. There's a similar concept here that you would want to own a GPU NFT and take a share of the rewards. And so this is, again, a core part of what the NFT offers. It allows anybody to take custody of that and claim the rewards that come with it. And just at a high level, by separating out the owner and the provider, this is another big advantage for us. We feel that that the providers need to be left to do what they do best, which is operating the compute, and Berkeley as a protocol and the network of people that are a part of Berkeley can help do the rest, whether it's crowdfunding those assets to help grow the data center, as Paul was mentioning, finding workloads, et cetera, by having more people outside of just the operator who's constrained, or even Berkeley Compute, which is one company, allowing anybody to be an owner, an advocate, a salesperson. That is very paramount to what we're trying to do here. And so the more owners we can get, the more people who are engaged and involved, the more ability the network has to grow and become the largest compute network in the world.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add to that, Brent, that within that paradigm, we see several different types of customer personas or profiles for GPU owners. First and foremost, at least initially, we see kind of degens in the crypto ecosystem being interested in participating. They don't need to have any technical skill. They've got a bunch of crypto laying around. They like to put it to work, and they can earn Berkeley Compute tokens by doing that. So we think there's just like a pretty significant demand for that type of investment opportunity. They own the GPU. A lot of people get exercised when you use the word investment. Sounds like a securities offering. It's not. You're buying this thing and earning money. And so we think that there's a bunch of people in crypto who want to put their crypto to work doing that. We particularly believe that there are people within the Chia ecosystem who are sitting on a bunch of XCH and would like to be able to put that to work. And we think that this is a great opportunity for doing that. There's a second customer kind of persona around this, which is, totally like separate from crypto, people who will view this asset as a really great source of passive income. It's a capital investment. There's a payback period. There's an ROI or return on equity if they form an organization to buy these GPUs. And what a very significant focus of our team over the next 3 to 6 months is demonstrating that this is like an institutional grade asset. People should want to buy this and own it over a period of time. There's a great cash flow that comes from owning this sort of thing. And so we're building a bunch of metrics around demonstrating that because we think there's like a very significant amount of institutional capital that wants to own these types of assets. And so we're going very squarely at that. This isn't just like a degen crypto play. There are many different players that want to put money into this. I've been surprised to learn that, you know, whether it's a family office or a hedge fund or VC, there are like deep wells of money that are currently already going into participating in the AI revolution by buying and investing in this type of infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. And definitely exciting that you guys are looking at all of the different angles for how people can participate. We have a couple of questions that are a little bit more focused on the NFTs themselves, the digital twins, as it were. And this question in our Q&A is, I understand this is still in the future, but who would have control over minting the digital twin GPU NFTs? Is it something where the end customer may need a Chia verified credential? Maybe it's vetted by the data center. Kind of what's the process for minting that actual digital twin? And Dylan, this one might be good for you here.
I mean, it's certainly, you know, TBD. I think that's very much one of the key kind of parts of our stack that we want to get through quickly. I mean, and the way that we're generally thinking about it is that the provider and data center operator is the minter of these assets. The custodian of the assets is the one who's doing it. You can think about, you know, maybe an analogy being Sotheby's or, you know, Christie's, right? Those are two large auction houses. So when they take custody of an asset, even if they're doing it on consignment, right, on behalf of another owner, it is their brand that is being, you know, leveraged here. And that really is what at a high level we believe NFTs are is kind of a clear indicator of a brand and you know, kind of backing from that brand. So at the highest level, attaching a brand and a unique identifier to the NFT itself is very important. How that translates to, you know, the next phase where anybody can do it, you know, I think we're going to see a similar paradigm where there's a brand that is good at operating distributed compute beyond, you know, a brand that runs it within a single location or a variety of managed locations, right? And so I think that's where this still ends up, is just like pools have brands, a pool of distributed compute may still have it. And that is the you know, to answer the question directly, the minter is generally going to be who is verifying that this asset is legit and is going to take the responsibility for that asset remaining to be a digital twin.
Yeah, thank you very much. That definitely answers the question there. And of course, implementation or precise implementation is still a little up in the air how it'll work. But one more aspect on that, on creating the digital twin, what does it look like for the life cycle of the digital twin? As we all know, GPUs, you know, new ones come out and they have better compute and can replace older GPUs. How is this taken into account for the digital twin aspect?
That's a JM. I'm going to pass that to JM because we
thought about this a lot, right? You know, one of the ways that was interesting that I thought was, you know, there was a Bloomberg article that was something along the lines of like, you know, $15 billion worth of GPUs were bought for crypto mining and that Ethereum run up in the craziness of 2020 and 2021. And this was, you got to remember, this was before the AI stuff took off. There was no generative art, there was no Midjourney, there was no Stable Diffusion. And when Ethereum went to, you know, proof of stake and the merge, you know, I was like, as somebody who's, you know, done forecasting for storage and market analysis, was like, well, obviously $15 billion of the GPUs are going to get unwound into the consumer space and just dump the price, and you'll be able to find GPUs for pennies on the dollar on eBay. And that didn't happen. So one of the reasons, and this again, it wasn't mostly the AI stuff did start to pick up towards the tail end of that, like a year later, but a big chunk of that was really just the gaming market was really strong for these secondary sales. And so, you know, there's two ways to think about, you know, future price of GPU. like looking at the compute and performance characteristics, your teraflops per dollar, teraflops per watt, the power efficiency of these cards. And generally, like from the 3 series to 4 series, we saw a pretty big jump, and from the 4 to 5 series, maybe we'll see it. It's still the same TSMC litho, so maybe it's not going to be as big a jump on the per dollar. Like on the absolute metric, it will be higher. So typically, like a device has a warranty of consumer devices 3 years, and enterprise are 5-year warranties. That as we've known from HDDs and the circular drive initiative, that devices can last sometimes up to 10 years. And so in the GPU compute market, it's just a matter of like how long is it going to still be profitable? How long does the data center operator want to run it? At some point, does the data center operator decommission that asset and then give the NFT holder some residual? How is that built into the contract? So these are all things that we have to figure out. But generally, like the life cycle of consumer electronics and in GPUs in the compute space, GPUs specifically have held their value extremely well compared to almost every other class of consumer and consumer electronics. So.
Yeah, I would say I just wanted to add on to that when we think about the life cycle and when these would be decommissioned, we're thinking about it from the point of view of investors who want to put money in, see a return, put more money in, and buy more GPUs. And to do that, they like at scale, most investors are going to want to see just a very standard type of offering. They aren't going to generally be like, well, this could be decommissioned at my option 3 years from now, or 5 years, or 8 years to keep it running. Most are just going to want to see a super standard set of investment terms. It's like everything is online for 5 years, and whether it's ready or not, decommissioned, residual value, move on, and reinvest. Because we're starting with about 1,000 GPUs now. What happens when there's several 100,000? And if they're all utterly different from each other, and there's not really an easy way to classify them, it becomes very difficult to see it as an overall investment and a vehicle. So that standardization is really, really important to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much. And we have another question in the Q&A that's a little bit targeted towards that last part you were mentioning, and that's kind of all of these GPUs will be, decentralized at some point and have different quality ratings. So the question is, as an owner of an NFT digital twin, is there any insurance or recourse if the physical twin breaks? So if I buy that NFT and the back end GPU stops working, what do I as the owner have as a recourse?
Yeah, Jim, do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's where this pooling aspect comes into play. When you're buying a GPU and it's part of this pool, like obviously there's some percentage of failure rate of hardware, there's some percentage of downtime a year, for maintenance, and that stuff is just would be built into the pool, right? Where so if you buy a 4090 that's part of this pool, if your system, for instance, the one that you bought like was mapped to that serial number, was down for a week or broke or something, then you'd still be getting earnings because you're part of the pool. And then it's up to that operator to go warranty that card, get a replacement, and do data center operations. Now that work is real work, and that's part of like the operator and provider. They get some percentage by maintaining and operating that NFT. They get a cut of the revenue that's generated from AI workloads to operate the data center and do stuff like that. So yes, you need a support staff. Yes, you need at scale all kinds of telemetry and analysis and debug for managing a cluster at that scale. And that's part of the suite of software we think we're going to be building for providers, is a way to like actually manage that. And if the proof of concept goes very well with the initial data center operators that we're partnering with, like, and obviously we're dog fooding this ourselves, then maybe there's a model where we can have smaller guys that want to mint an NFT and come up with a different contract or something. Maybe that's something, again, if it's an open source protocol, people will be able to do that. Now, will you want to buy an NFT from the trusted provider, or one that's cheaper from some random guy and just trust him? That's part of this stuff that we have to work through with real world assets of like, what do people actually want? And if it turns out just they want reliable compute from data centers. That we'll probably be gearing a lot of the software and platform services towards that. But like we're trying to figure out a way to include all these different smaller participants as well. So.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And one clarifying question on the digital twins themselves. When you're buying a digital twin, is it a digital twin of the specific GPU, or is it a representation of the cluster or the pool?
So it could be both. You could buy a GPU NFT of an entire cluster. So that could be, in Evergreen's case, an 8 GPU 4090 cluster. And it could also be an NFT that represents a specific GPU, obviously at a much lower price point. And so that's going to be appealing to different types of buyers.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I think what we were thinking through is the pricing gets really complicated when you start to work in the platform overhead of like, motherboard, CPU, and DRAM, and SSDs, and networking, and all that stuff. So that we envision as part of like the provider hosting agreement platform, that like you're buying this GPU that is this GPU, and it has a serial number, and it can attest to that, and it's a real asset, and then it's being hosted in some data center cluster that has all those requirements. Like, so if you need to rent the GPU as a service, obviously, to do that, to rent a VM or a Docker container, you have to have cores and CPU threads and memory and all that stuff to actually use it. And so, we're thinking about that as probably most likely part of like the the operating agreement and platform. So.
Perfect. Thank you. And then a directed question towards Dylan and JM here about Evergreen and Farm GPU. Since we know you guys are going to be providers right off the bat, do you already have plans to mint digital twins for your GPUs, for your clusters? What is your breakdown going to be in that regard?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, my hope is that all the owners are on board to mint all of them. Again, a lot of this was born out of my challenges, managing at this point a dozen plus owners who, need that level of visibility. And so in dog fooding and in coming up with something that is helpful, it's so great to have an existing set of customers to work with, right? And so I hope it's all 800. It should be most of them. In any case, it's guaranteed to be many hundreds of them on chain. It's just a question of how quickly we get them on and how we dog food it. But I'd like to see it. I'd like to see that be the first thing we do, is we bring them on and have people be able to see what's going on right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the challenge is going to be that we have to build a lot of the tokenomics and the token interactions and all that stuff, prior to us going to mainnet. And so we're trying to think through like, what does the test net look like, and is there something we can do with stable coins to get like real assets, but on a test net kind of environment? So yeah, there's a lot of different options. We do not have it all figured out yet, but we definitely want to get a bunch of real world experience with tokenizing these assets and understanding how they're going to interact. So
Yeah, thank you very much. I know we've gotten into the nitty gritty with the last few questions here, so I want to go back to a little bit more of a high level. And Paul, I know you wanted to answer this question here inside of our Q&A. It's about the funding for Berkeley Compute. And in the blog, we all know that CNI led the funding round. The specific question is, who were the participants in the seed funding round? Was it just CNI? Are you planning for future rounds, and can the community participate?
Yeah, great question. So for those in the Chia ecosystem who can look on chain, you can see that Chia has invested, and as we've announced, $5 million into Berkeley Compute. They led the seed round. We have kept the round open and are continuing to take a small number of participants who want to participate as well. I would say this is not a public token sale. We're not, this is not an ICO. We're selling equity in our company, and it's a private placement. So we're not here to kind of promote or try to solicit capital for our project. But we do have a relatively small number of close associates who are also participating in the round. In terms of how others can participate, there will be a few ways. So we will be doing a second raise after the seed, and that will be closer to mainnet. So we will do another equity raise, which will be a Series A. And so there'll be an opportunity for people to participate there. And as well, if folks want to participate in the overall Berkeley Compute protocol and have exposure to the token, they'll certainly be able to buy GPUs to put on the network. And the first set of GPUs that go live on the network are going to be earning Berkeley Compute token. And so there's plenty of people who are going to want to just get exposure to the token and participate by owning a GPU. We are DePIN, so getting into a DePIN early and being on the network early is a very common way of solving the cold start problem, supply and demand side. But it's also appealing to a lot of people who want to take some risk by the and provide capacity on the network to get exposure to the token.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that deep dive. Do one of you mind going a little bit more into how the customers will actually get themselves involved with Berkeley Compute? How is one going to rent out a GPU for compute? And what is the customer facing side of this look like?
Yeah. So, we do envision, Berkeley Compute having its own marketplace. And, I think, some of the leaders you just in the deep, in the Web 2 DePIN space, I guess, I wouldn't call them DePIN, but we'll call them Web 2 on-demand compute platforms like, RunPod and Vast.ai. Have pretty good user experiences. The RunPod user experience is very good. Like if I've shown people that are used to AWS, hey, look, you can click a button and have a GPU pod of whatever GPU you want in 4 or 5 seconds. Like that user experience is really nice. By the way, I use that for all my Chia farming decompression stuff. I just have it run when GPUs are idle, and running in the background, I have it do the Chia stuff when my GPUs are idle. And so we definitely, like, I saw another question about like credit cards and crypto and transactions. I think we have a lot of lessons also from like Akash and the DePINs that are out there about, doing token only and crypto only payments, for these platforms is really prohibitive. And that's not what AI developers want. AI developers have credit cards generally because they're VC backed, and they're traditional funded startups, and they want to pay in credit card. they want to get a bill and they want to get an invoice so they can write it off. And they don't want to be paying tokens. So there's a lot of that stuff we have to solve on the back end of like, how do we track which workloads are going to what GPU and what provider in the pool, and without with making that transaction very seamless. So but yeah, we understand the platforms and marketplaces that are out there, which ones are doing well and why, and we think we can make the best in class marketplace. But I think, as Paul mentioned and Dylan mentioned, one of the things we're going to go after first is this tokenization part is a key aspect of the protocol, and we have to go for developing that stuff first. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much. We are getting close to the top of the hour here, and we do still have a number of questions in. I don't think we're going to be able to make it through all of the questions today, but we are going to knock off as many as we possibly can. However, to make sure that anybody with follow-up questions can get back in touch with you and your team, what is the best way for the community or other interested parties to get in touch with Berkeley Compute?
Well, we have a Berkeley Compute Twitter. I believe all 3 of us are in the Chia Discord in the community or whatever channel Clyde he tells us to go to. And Paul, any other, I guess we
Yeah, best way right now is just to send us a DM on Twitter at 0xberkeley. I took some heat in the Chia Discord for us not having a Discord set up already. It's not because we don't know how to or we're too lazy. We're really very much focused in this first month on building up the team, getting our plans ready, and we know that as I'm sure you're very familiar, Brant, in the Chia Discord, we know that once you put that out there, there's an expectation of support, and we want to provide a very high quality support and there's 3 of us at the moment, so we really can't do that today. But soon, TM, we will have all the typical channels, a Discord, a Telegram, uh, and we'll have staff that can support that, but we're just not quite there yet.
Yeah, completely understandable for sure. And sounds like you guys have a great focus on building out the tokenomics side of the business, and definitely a higher higher focus is needed in that regard right now. Now, regarding the Chia Discord, you're 100% spot on. Feel free to use the community projects channel, but we also have the DPIN thread in there. So it's a thread built off the Chia discussion thread there. And you guys can also feel free to use that DPIN thread to help consolidate things a little bit more until you get your own Discord
Cool.
server up and running in another
Yeah,
platform there.
and I know the Chia guys don't like being tagged. I probably won't see it unless you do tag me. So please tag me. We can answer some questions in there. Yeah, and I mentioned, this should be really exciting for the Chia community. I think this is, a big opportunity, to have a large startup ecosystem as part of the Chia community. Yeah, we're definitely very thankful that that Chia's provided us this opportunity to go build. And obviously all of us, as you mentioned, have deep roots to Chia, and we want to all see Chia do well. And this is building on top of it with all the good tech that it has is a big important part of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's going to be great to see this launch on Chia, and I'm definitely intrigued to see the unique tokenization concept as it's built out, flushed out here. I'd like to ask one more question for the community, and that's how can people start to participate now, right now in your current stage? Obviously, people have a bunch of questions, but we have some developers who might be interested in helping, people with GPU who might be able to help test. What is the best avenue for people to help, and in what areas would you like community support?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things they can do now. One is they can go to our website and sign up on the wait list to be an operator. And a second is they can sign up on the website to participate in an upcoming GPU owner sale. So we are actually quite hungry to hear from the Chi ecosystem about demand for participating in the network in those 2 avenues. And we'll share soon how the ecosystem can get more directly involved day to day. We've got a lot of work to do, and we're not trying to pretend that we're farther along than we are. We're super early, and we've got a bunch of stuff to get ready before we can really engage a community in like a very aggressive and deep way.
Mo very much. And for any of the questions that we have outstanding here today that are in the Zoom Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and copy those over to the Chia Discord. And I'm sure the wonderful team here will go ahead and jump in as time permits in order to answer the rest of those. And then I'll make sure we scrape out any of the other questions that were in the Chia Discord that we did not get to as well. So I want to thank you guys for coming up here. Really appreciate you taking the time and relaying what it is that Berkeley Compute is going to be doing throughout the next few months, and definitely excited to see it all come to fruition and start launching on testnet there. Were there any last minute things that you guys wanted to leave the community with?
Yeah, all the things that Paul said and following us, and we do have, if you go to the blog.Berkeley Compute website, you can sign up for our newsletter, and then you'll get notified when we write new blogs, and we can, it's also a good place to find us there. And Paul said, yeah, just watch, we're going to be, I think you guys will be updated along the way of like our progress, and hopefully be able to share a bunch of exciting stuff soon about testnet and how people can get involved.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys' time. Everybody who attended, do jump into the Chia Discord to ask any follow-up questions and remain connected with the great team who joined us today. But thank you all. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and looking forward to learning more about Berkeley Compute as different things are developed.
Cool. Thanks, Brant.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brant.
y'all.
Thanks everybody for the questions today. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.